In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
Coming up this week, we'll talk to the director and one of the actors in the first ever all-Cypriot independent feature film to be made on the island, which is launching this week.
It was done in English because, I'm South African Cypriot, so it was easier for me to write it in English, and it is able to travel further if it's in English. It's kind of the expat experience in Cyprus, but because, like you say, we've really showcased the countryside and the familiar landscapes of Cyprus. We have a Cypriot actor, it's an all-Cypriot production.
We'll talk to the head of the European Asylum Support Office in Malta about an agreement signed with the Cypriot authorities recently to support them in this area.
So not only Cyprus, but all member states in the next 1.5 to 2 years has to adapt their system and legislation to that new package. So it is, in the short term, yes, catching up, but also already taking advantage of the fact that for the longer term, everything should be in place as well.
And the Commissioner for Children's Rights will be telling us about a new law that's been put before Parliament to protect children from sexual abuse.
I am confident it will go towards that way. I know, and we all know, and it was the first comment I made, there will be loopholes, there will be things too that could improve. But unless we start and put the framework in place, we'll never proceed. It's long overdue.
The first independent film to be made in Cyprus without government funding has been screened this week. It's called Committed, and it's directed by Stellana Kliris. Stellana, congratulations. We've spoken before when you were doing shorter films, and I remember talking to you a couple of years ago when you were trying to get the funding together to make Committed. Now let's start there, because films are expensive, and a full-length feature film, you need a reasonably sized budget, even if it's done on a shoestring.
Yes.
You went with crowdfunding. Now tell me about how that worked.
We used Indiegogo, which is one of the main crowdfunding sites out there, which is basically putting up a campaign online for whatever your project is, whether it's a film or a small business, and where anybody in the world can donate an amount of money ranging from $10,000 to $10,000 in exchange for different perks. For example, you might get a DVD or an invitation to the premiere and so on, and it becomes a very interactive experience with your audience, with the people who contributed. And it's become a very useful way for filmmakers and other people around the world to raise funds for various projects. It's still a little new in Europe, and particularly in Cyprus, so we were not able to raise our full goal through this campaign, but we were able to find our investor through it. So with a combination of crowdfunding and an angel investor, we managed to fund our film.
And tell us about the film, because it's something I think quite close to your heart. You wrote it too, didn't you?
Yes, I wrote it. It's when you're making independent films, it becomes very much a multitask. You end up putting on a lot of hats. The film is an English language romantic comedy about a man who is being pressured to propose to his girlfriend, George, played by Rosie Charalambous, and they have a fight. He takes off in the morning in his car just to get away from anything that is wedding related, and as he's driving in the middle of nowhere, he comes across a bride in the middle of the road who has supposedly run out on her wedding. And then what we have is she gets into the car, and we have a road trip through the roads of Cyprus where they talk about love, marriage, relationships, and there's a very big twist at the end.
We won't go into the twist and spoil it for everyone, but Orestes, you're here. What did you think when you read the script?
It was quite interesting because I saw two characters that they were very familiar to me, but in a very extraordinary situation. So I found it really interesting the way Stellana approached the whole marriage thing, the theme and all that. And I found George really entertaining for my taste, because he's a very stand-up guy, and he's doing everything really properly, and he's so politically correct, which has nothing to do with me, honestly. And it was quite interesting to step into his shoes and see how he will react into all the perks of the bride.
Now, it's in English, and obviously it's set in Cyprus. So It's a great showcase for the Cyprus countryside, I guess.
Yeah.
The CTO should be very pleased that you're showing so many lovely areas of Cyprus.
I hope so.
But the fact that it's in English will reach a much wider audience. What about the Cypriot audience, though?
So, it was done in English because, I'm South African Cypriot, so it was easier for me to write it in English, and it is able to travel further if it's in English. It's kind of the expat experience in Cyprus, but because, like you say, we've really showcased the countryside and the familiar landscapes of Cyprus. We have a Cypriot actor. It's an all Cypriot production. I hope that this encourages local audiences to come and watch it. It's something they should be quite proud of. We've really put our whole hearts into it, and we actually had a great review in one of the newspapers yesterday calling it, one of the best Cypriot productions in recent years, which was a lovely statement. So I hope it's something that people embrace, despite the language.
Will you maybe think of Greek subtitles at some point?
No, there are definitely Greek subtitles. Yeah, it's going to be released. It's released with Greek subtitles in all cinemas. So yeah, it's very accessible to Greek audiences.
And it'll be running for how long in local cinemas?
Usually films run for about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks in Cyprus. It just depends on our audience turnout. So the more people come and watch it, the longer it'll stay on.
It's the first time you've done a full-length feature
Yes.
film. We spoke earlier about the shorter films. Is there a big difference in the approach?
Definitely. It's a different kind of story. There's a different way, of telling a story in 5-10 minutes as opposed to 90 minutes. And I prefer features because you've got time to really develop your characters and really tell your story. Although there's a certain beauty to shorts as well. They're just two different art forms. And obviously you need a lot more money to make a feature. Although I think in our case, this cost about as much as my first short film. So it's, anything is possible with film.
And Oresta, you too have done TV work, you've worked on the stage, but a commitment, if you like, to a full-length feature film. How was your approach different as an actor?
For me, acting is the same whether on stage or on TV. You have to love your character, you have to understand your character, and you have to create him from scratch, and then it's all about action and about how you choose this person to live and breathe, and that's what it takes to create something that it's real. And I had the chance in this feature film to have all this massive, text, and the character was like right from the beginning till the end. So I had all this material to develop a full-length character that was brilliant. That was actually really really nice because I could show all the different aspects of this person who has all these little quirks and he's a little bit weird as well. So that was lovely. And it was my first feature film, and it was so nice to do this with Stalana, that she was so good and so helpful, and the crew as well. And Melia, the girl we were with in the film, she was fantastic. She was brilliant, and we did this with a lot of love. So I hope that's out there and you could see it when you watch the film.
Which, of course, people can do from the 20th of June for at least 2 weeks in all the cinemas around Cyprus, and I'm sure it'll be going to festivals as well. The very best of luck.
Thank you so much, Rosie.
Thank you, Rosie.
Online and as a podcast, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
The European Asylum Support Office, that's EASO, and Cyprus recently signed a special support plan by which EASO will be supporting Cyprus until summer next year in several areas like training staff, vulnerable groups and advice on special support and procedures. Well, Dr. Robert Visser is Executive Director of EASO. He's the one who signed the agreement with Cyprus, and he joins us on the programme. Robert, could you please start by telling us exactly what it was that you signed with Minister Hasikos and how it will be implemented?
Yes, thank you very much. Here from Malta, where our headquarters is based. I signed in the margins of the Ministerial Council in Luxembourg, together with the Cypriot Minister of Interior, what we call special support plan. That is an operational plan to support a member state that is in a situation where they need and ask for support. That support can be of a different nature. but all of it is directed to the practical cooperation and to operational activities, such as you said, training, identification of asylum seekers, identification of special groups that needs attention, etc.
Now, EASO has worked obviously with many other countries in the past. Do they all have similar problems when it comes to dealing with asylum seekers?
They do not all have similar problems, though the problems are in the same area. The tendency, whatever we do, is that over the years migration fluctuates. It's going up, it's going down, then it's flat again. And then suddenly something somewhere changes. So it's very much about capacity, and that's a red line in different requests. What is not the same is the way in which member states are prepared for such a change. Some member states have a long tradition in dealing with asylum seekers and migration, and others are much more recent in this area. And the overall aim, as you know, in the European Union is that we should have a common system of asylum so that every member state is more or less at the same level, both quality and capacity-wise.
So does this mean that your support will enable Cyprus to, if you like, catch up? Because much like Malta, I suppose, we both joined the EU at the same time, and we're both as well, in a sense, on the front line when it comes to asylum seekers and migrants, particularly from Africa. Will your support mean that we can catch up our infrastructure? Because it does take a very long time here, it seems, for processing of applications and so on.
It does indeed, is a possibility for Cyprus to catch up, as you say it. And it's also very timely, because last year Parliament and Council decided on a second phase of the European asylum regulations. So not only Cyprus, but all member states in the next 1.5 to 2 years has to adapt their system and the legislation to that new package. So it is, in the short term, yes, catching up, but also already taking advantage of the fact that for the longer term, everything should be in place as well.
You talk about enhancing reception conditions, for example. I think it's fair to say that ours here in Cyprus are certainly not up to Northern European standards. What sort of changes need to be made?
The new reception legislation on European level requires much more harmonized and similar approach reception. That is mainly open accommodation. Open means not detaining. That is for some member states a new phenomenon. It is accepted by all. It is legislation, so it takes 28 countries to agree, and they have agreed. But it might be, for some member states, quite a step in an unknown territory, so to say. And it's certainly at this field that we will support Cyprus in how to build up such centres, how to manage them, how to organise them in such a way that you can deal with the requirements.
Which brings us, of course, to the training of staff. Very important, particularly when migrants or asylum seekers are coming from countries of conflict. And we've obviously had a lot of applications from Syrians over the last couple of years, and now we see what's happening in Iraq. I imagine we might see more coming from there as well. The way that these people are treated after horrendous situations at home and possibly dangerous journeys to get to somewhere safe requires something very special, doesn't it? Is it EASO who does the training?
Yes, we do provide training for all the member states. It is voluntary. The member states are allowed to do it themselves as well, but as it is, as you say, specialist work, and as it is more efficient, not only cost efficient, but also in other ways, to have a one place where you do it instead of 28 different institutes in member states. So more and more EASO is providing the training for a large number of member states, including Cyprus.
And you're hoping, I think, or you may have already started work. You did say after signing the agreement that you will start work immediately on the ground to ensure effective implementation of the plan. Do you have a sort of ABC of the order in which this needs to be done? Have you started?
We have started, last week already. So indeed, very soon after signing, and we try. Everywhere in Europe there is something like a summer and some summer holidays, but already you have quite a number of activities started, at least before the summer is starting.
And presumably, since the agreement runs until, I think, July of 2015, that's barely a year. You've done this before. Can everything be done in a year?
Yes, we carefully plan it together with the member state. It is dependent on the capacity of a member state, because we are not just walking into a member state. It is a two-sided affair. So from the Cypriot side, the capacity must be there to work effectively. Can it be done in 1 year? What we have planned is doable in 1 year. If during that operational period we agree that there should be additional activities, then that is always possible. For example, we have been working now for 3 years already in Greece. Initially was foreseen for 2 years, but a number of activities extra have been agreed.
What about the cost? Because obviously, particularly in the current economic climate, and of course with Cyprus under the Troika bailout or bail-in, money is tight. Is this a costly thing to do, or can it be done with, if you like, minor tweaks to the system we already have in place?
That depends very much on the sort of activities. Reception traditionally is building, is construction, so that is relatively costly. Training, etc. We provide the trainers on our budget, so that is relatively less costly. It depends on each of the steps. The more structural activities are activities of the member state itself. It's not us that build a reception center and that own a reception center. It is Cyprus that want to build a reception center, and that is the owner of the reception center. So there the costs are on the side of the member state.
It's underway already. How do you quantify and indeed monitor the progress of this?
Yes, we monitor during the program all the steps and evaluate it regularly to see if it needs adjustment. And afterwards, we monitor in general terms the member states and their capacities. So we have a trend analysis to see every month what the state of play in the member states is, and we try to give a good overview for the member states itself at first, because it's most important for the member states themselves to be prepared.
It certainly is. Dr. Robert Visser, Executive Director of EASO, that's the European Asylum Support Office in Malta. Many thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Charalambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
Well, I think most people would agree that the sexual abuse laws, particularly pertaining to children in Cyprus, need bringing up to date. The government has presented Parliament with proposals, and there's been a lot of discussion about amendments and whether it should be passed or what should be changed. Lida Kursumba is both the Law Commissioner and the Commissioner for Children's Rights. She joins us on the programme. Lida, what do you make of these new proposals? Because so far, actually, we know so many cases where people have got away with child sexual abuse in Cyprus. So it is shocking in this day and age. Is this going to solve that problem?
This is the intention. And first of all, I want to say that I really welcome this new bill that has been laid before Parliament for discussion, and it's been discussed day in, day out before the Parliamentary Committee of Legal Affairs. There is intensive discussion because of the urgent nature of the matter that we have to enact a complete and holistic legislative framework. That no time was given for consultation among the government services as it should have, but still it was announced from the beginning that it will do all that before the Parliamentary Committee. That's why the work of this committee, it's a very hard one. It's harder than in any other case. So it's day in, day out. The intention it is, yes, to have a very good legislative framework in an effort to combat this problem of sexual abuse, to prevent first, and then to combat the sexual abuse and sexual exploitation of children.
I think it also is bringing, bearing in mind how things have changed over the years, it also is covering grooming, and there are penalties for people who aid and abet as well.
It does. The purpose is to do all that. That's why it makes it more difficult. But we're all putting our bit, including, and I want to stress that, the professionals involved from the government departments, but also from the private sectors, like the psychologists, the social workers, and the views are very valuable. One issue which I raised from the beginning and was taken on board, we have to be very careful how we treat children who are doing sexual abuse of children, because, as the European directive points out, activity between teenagers is in the usual course of finding, discovering their sexual orientation, their sexual life. So one has to be very careful how you treat that. Having pointed out that, it's part of the difficulties how you treat that. Of course, there are precedents from other countries. So special care is taken to exclude some of the offences if it's between children, or the age of consent on which this bill is based, because this bill is based on the fact that if you're talking about an adult, there can be no consent for this kind of activity on behalf of a person below 17, which is a very big step forward. But if you're talking about teenagers, it's these young people who, so whatever they have, it's part of ordinary life of growing up at school. So special care is taken. Some of these offences have to be excluded when we're talking about children, and for some others, you have to excluded in the sense you make different provisions, like say the age of consent is 13, and then you make provisions relating to the age difference. Well, and then when it comes to other offences, which of course you accept that even if it's done by an underage person below 18, they're offences, then bibliography and professional knowledge says, not suggests, says, for reasons I will tell you shortly, you don't impose the same sentences like 20 years and 25. And then you don't send them to prison, so you send them to some other institutions for treatment. The reason being that, again, the experts say that when it comes to an adult, it may be pedophile. It may be, as a general rule, very few of them can be cured, if I'm going to use this word. It's not curable. You can ask them to go under treatment or some courses to make them control these impulses. And because I was told something I never thought of, for them this comes from the brain and not from their organs. But when we're talking about children, it's not the same. The reason they commit this is because they don't know. It's because of their hormones. It's because they have not been told in their so-called sexual education, which is not existent in our schools, that you control yourself, and the girls you say yes and no, and often because they have anger for many reasons in them. So it's these issues that one has to deal with in this law, which go beyond legal issues, psychological and medical reasons.
So you're basically making a distinction between much older people and adults who are targeting youngsters.
Abusing an underage person, a child, and when children between themselves do something. And of course, one is not going to allow, as I said, abuse by one child. So we're talking about consensual. For adults, you don't accept that they can do consensual with a child, whereas for children you can accept, but then you still keep the offences if it's not consensual or in some of them, but then you accept the fact that for a child, the duty of the society is not to lock them for 25 years because the medical world says that they can be cured and get over it, is to give them a sentence not in a prison which will destroy their life, but provide them these programs. And one of the problems is we don't have these programs in place.
I was just going to say, we don't have those programs in place. Were young people consulted before this bill was drafted?
Well, they were not consulted by the government, they were not consulted by us, but I have been consulting children on this issue. That's why I'm so strong and adamant on my views, because sexual exploitation and sexual abuse, it's an issue I've been working with children. As you very well know, Rosie, you've done it in your programs time and again. I have various forms that I work with children. One of them is the Commissioner's Young Advisory Team, which is a group of 40 children, equal number of boys and girls, aged 13 to 17, from all geographical areas of Cyprus, from all backgrounds, from all levels of society, and with them I discuss things and I take their views on board. One of the issues we discussed is, again, this sexual abuse. When I discussed it with them, first I discovered they didn't know what it was. Because when I spoke to them about the 1 in 5 campaign, you know about that, we spoke about it, that a research of the Council of Europe has shown that in the 47 countries of the Council of Europe, 1 every 5 children will be sexually abused before maturity. And I said, they look so puzzled in denoting it doesn't happen to us. When I explained what it was, they gave so many examples that had happened to them. We discovered out of 40, there were more than 8, which was there were more than 1 in 5, they said themselves. Of course, they gave me their views. One of the things they said, they don't have a sexual education. They expect it to happen in schools. So they say, we want to speak to our parents. We have no restrictions, but the parents don't feel free to talk to us about that. And so I know by talking to parents that parents don't have a training as to how to tackle these issues. And you have to speak to your children from kindergarten about these issues.
So we need a mindset change in society, actually, basically.
Exactly.
Do you have every confidence that the bill will be passed and it will go some way towards addressing the issues that we've been hearing about recently?
I'm a person who always believes this is glass half full, and I always believe things can happen, and I'm confident, yes, it will pass, because the intention over there is to make it as good as we can. All of us, members of parliament that had disputes among them before that, they are still there, very constructive attitude, the government sector, and myself certainly, and everybody who is there. I am confident it will go towards that way. I know, and we all know, and it was the first comment I made, there will be hula hoops, there will be things that could improve. But unless we start and put the framework in place, we'll never proceed. It's long overdue. Just to remind you that 4 years ago, in 2010, after the Lanzarote Convention was signed and inaugurated officially in Rome, I had written to the then Minister of Welfare Services asking her that we should start discussing it, and to the then Attorney General. Nothing happened. And this is why you have so many problems. If consultation has started at that time, it has started but it stopped. Between government departments, with the law office, the civil society, those involved, what we would have to discuss before Parliament would have been a better product, in the sense views would have been taken on board, then it would be to help parliamentarians to make their final decisions, because it's up to them at the end of the day. Now we're doing this, and this is the difficulty. It's not easy in the parliamentary committee room. But anyway, it's the best step forward towards this direction. That has happened so far in Cyprus. But we can improve it.
Cyprus Commissioner for Children's Rights, Lida Kursumba. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.